Hello, everyone. Welcome to the DNA Behavior webinar. This is our number 5 virtual team webinar, a series of 8. So we'll be hosting these for the next 3 weeks at 3 o'clock Eastern Time. We're very excited to have everybody here, and thank you for continuing to support the webinar. We've gotten a lot of great feedback about the series, and Nikki and I have really enjoyed sort of presenting this. In the last 2 weeks, Lisa Travis has been hosting the webinar with Nikki, so we're very excited that we're able to share our learnings around sort of how to work as a virtual team effectiveness. So we're pretty excited today because the topic today is going to be on behavioral science and how to apply it. So it might be a little bit technical for some folks, but I think in the use cases that we walk through, the what-if scenarios, I think you'll find quite interesting. So the format's going to be a little bit different than what you've seen before, so hopefully that keeps you engaged. My name is Leon Morales. I am the Managing Director here at DNA Behavior, and I've been with the company since 2012. I'm fascinated by human behavior, and that's what really got me into this work. And I've seen team performance truly evolve, with teams that were what we call in the storming phase. So seeing sort of the work in behavioral science and the ability to sort of use that from a scientific perspective and then apply it with the work that you do is pretty exciting for me. And I also share that with my co-presenter, Nikki, who I've worked with, and I'll let her introduce herself.
Thanks, Leon. My name is Nikki Evans. I lead training here at DNA, and I'm super excited to be with you and part of this webinar series. I really do think that work should be a place where we get to thrive, and I understand that it can be a little bit harder not to feed off of that direct energy being in an office with somebody right now, but there are tons of people doing it right now, and we would love to share some ways that you can exchange that energy even virtually with one another. So we'll talk a little bit about that today.
All right, thank you, Nikki. And so for today, we're going to cover a few topics, and we try to keep these webinars to around 45 minutes. That would include sort of going through the poll questions, because we have 3 of those today. We also invite you to ask questions. There's a Q&A box. There's also a chat box. We try to make it interactive. So please do, if something doesn't make sense to you or you need a little more information, one of us will be able to answer that sort of in real time on the webinar. And you will get a copy of the recording. You will also get a copy of the PDF after probably first thing in the morning once it's spooled out. So you'll get that. There will also be a short survey questionnaire that'll come out shortly after this webinar. And take the time to complete that, because we're asking a question about the next couple of webinars, and we'd love your input on that. For the format of our webinar today, we're going to cover the DNA behavior science, the bell curve, which probably those of you from statistics would maybe cringe on that, but I think there's a lot of, we'll make it very practical of why that's important in the work we do here at DNA Behavior. A factors overview, which that'll really get into the behavior of how it works. And then these what if scenarios, which will be kind of fun. We'll enjoy that. And then just for everybody's calendars, make sure that you mark next week, Wednesday. That's our number 6 webinar. And our focus is going to be on team performance. It's really around the whole staging of teams. So it'll be an exciting webinar for next week. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started on our this week's webinar. So we do have a first poll question here, and I'll present that on the screen, but just to orient you on it, it's, do you currently use a personality assessment or questionnaire with your team today? And your options are yes, no, or you're just not sure. So if you could just take a couple of minutes or a couple seconds and answer these. And a lot of you probably do know if you're using one, but if you're not, just answer that. It looks like we actually have 100% of the voting in. Nope. Okay. Yeah. All right. I'll give it probably 3 more seconds and we'll show the poll. All right. So here's where it stands. About 63% do use some tool, some sort of a form of a questionnaire. 25% do not, and then 13% of you are not certain if you do. So as we go through this, and if you're not certain or if you have any questions about it, please put it in the chat box. One of us will answer that. But thank you for sharing that. We appreciate it. And with that, we'll go to the next slide. And I'll turn this over to Nikki.
Thanks, Leon. So super exciting for you today. You get to say that you learned some science today. So when people ask you what you did, you can say science today. And I'm not going to get super detailed on you, but we do just want to talk a little bit about why the insights that we're able to offer here at DNA Behavior are so powerful. And it's because we have spent a lot of time on the science, on working with psychologists and other independent researchers and validators to help us really get our insights to a level of precision. And so we measure through our 46 questions a total of 138 items that then come together into our 8 main insights and our 64 sub-insights, and then get moved into combinations of those insights. So we have hundreds of insights that we can offer you that are scientifically validated and very precise. One of the things that, there are over 2 million scoring combinations. So at DNA Behavior, we've identified 10 styles, and we've had to get these 2 million scoring combinations. And really, I can't even say that last number around getting to a unique report, which gives you not only your scoring combination, but the weighted score to population. I don't even know what that number is. Quadrillions. I don't know. It's more than that. So tons of combinations. So we can measure very precisely one person's unique style. And so we think that this is important just to emphasize, to help people really understand that there are, while we talk about 10 styles for our natural behavior, and we talk about 4 or 5 styles for our communication preference, each individual really is individual and really is measured as an individual. And so when you use the insights that we're providing, you're really getting very precise insight into a personality. Leon and I share a personality type, one of the 10 styles, but when you look deeper into our scoring, you can see that there are places where we are very different from one another, and our response to a particular stimulus may be very different. For instance, Leon's very high on risk, and I am not so high on risk. And so you can see that although we share a profile style, we don't necessarily share the underlying components, because there will be patterns that make us fall into one style or another, but the specifics of our personality are really unique to each of us. And part of the way that we do this is through a forced choice questionnaire. When you are working with our discovery, you will be presented with a triad of words or phrases that you will rate as most like you or least like you. And you have to choose a most like and a least like, and this can be a little bit difficult to choose. For instance, you may not want to choose any of these choices, or you may want to choose all of them as a most like you choice, but you're forced to rank them as most and least like you. And that really gets to specific ingrained automatic behaviors that are core to who you are. This is not a situational assessment. This is not something that measures how you're feeling at any particular point in time. These are phrases, and this forced choice allows you to really give us your instinctual answers and insights into what is natural for you. And because of this, and because of the way the phrases and questions are worded, and because of the validation that we've done, it is difficult to game the assessment and pick things that are not like you unless you're just really trying. But we do see a particular scoring pattern. If you've tried to game the system, there can be a particular scoring pattern that comes out that we can identify as something that we would want to look at in the future as maybe not quite a natural style. So we promised you science and Leon promised you statistics in a bell curve. So that's what you're getting right now. So this bell curve really helps understand the percentage of population, which is part of that T-score that we talked about earlier, and then also kind of the scores that you get when you take the assessment and discovery. You'll get scored on different factors, and we're going to cover those factors here in a few minutes. Those scores that are between 45 and 55 are the mean scores, the mid-range scores. So 50 being right at the center of the distribution. What this means is that a score of 50 means that you're neither one sort of side of the factor or the other. You're right in the middle, meaning it's very easy for you, especially in that 45 to 55 range, to flex and become more or less like the like one side or the other of the graph. And when I'm talking about that, I'm going to show you what these factors are here in a minute, so this will become easier to understand and visualize. And then scores between 40 and 60 get one standard deviation away. So it becomes a little harder to flex when you're between 45 and 40 or 55 and 60. Those traits become a little bit more ingrained. Less than 40 or greater than 60, those traits are much more difficult to flex. And then if you get above 70 or below 30, those scores are very hardwired, very ingrained, very difficult to change or make a flex on. So it requires a lot of energy and focus and intention to shift one of those behaviors. And part of why I really like that we have this science around it, and you can start to see this, is as you're working with people and they're looking to change a behavior, you can tell how difficult might it be for that person to change that behavior based on the score that they get here. So you know, not only are you working with somebody that's fairly take charge, but you're working with somebody that's so take charge and independent that it's going to be very difficult for them to be in an environment that requires a lot of cooperation. And so while that it can be done, putting that kind of person in an environment where they are required to collaborate or to cooperate all the time is likely setting them up for a failure because they're not naturally wired to be in that kind of environment. And so we're able to see here how to help steer people to an environment that's going to be a good fit for them, as well as how intentional do they need to be when they want to make a change in that instinctual behavior. So let's talk about these behaviors. We measure 8 core behaviors. And when you look at this, that first behavior is commanding. So on the right side of that, you have take charge. People that are high take charge tend to like to set an agenda, tend to like to make decisions, tend to be fairly autonomous, tend to be fairly straightforward in the way they speak, pretty frank and direct with people. Where people on the cooperative side tend to be more agreeable, tend to like to follow an agenda. They don't like to make the decision. They like to have input into a decision. They're very good at collaborating with a group, at reading the group dynamic and getting input from everybody. They tend to be very diplomatic about the way they say things and the way they speak. And so again, you can see that we've shaded here in gray where that mid-range would be. So if you're between 45 and 55 on your scoring, it's pretty easy for you to either become a little bit more cooperative or a little bit more take charge. The further away I get from that center point toward take charge, the harder it is for me to be cooperative. The further away I get from this middle point, the harder it is for me to be more take charge, the more cooperative I'm going to tend to be. None of these are bad, no matter what your score is. There's not a wrong score here. There's how are you naturally wired, and then what does the current situation require of you, and how much energy will it require for you to display that behavior. So we will all fall in a different place on this scale, and we just have to, understanding this about ourselves and keeping these things in mind can help you really make decisions about where you're going to be naturally at your best and what might you need to do to change and flex to some of that other style. So our second factor, people. A lot of people equate somewhat with extroverted, introverted. It's not quite that, but it's close. So people high outgoing tend to think out loud a lot, tend to be very enthusiastic, tend to be very communicative, very open. Where people that are high on the reserved scale tend to be more quiet, tend to be more thoughtful, tend to like to retreat a little bit and have some time alone, tend to be a little bit more careful about what they say. And again, you can fall anywhere on this spectrum. There are lots of people that fall right in the middle of this spectrum who can flex to be outgoing in some situations, and then they need to recharge on their own later. So, again, you can start to look at when you start to understand where do you fall and where might people around you fall on this spectrum, you can gauge how much effort do I need to put into matching somebody else where they are. Our third factor is patience. People high patience tend to be very warm and accepting of things, tend to take their time and be fairly careful with things, tend to be very approachable with others, where people that are high on fast pace tend to be very quick to think and speak. They tend to be very focused on bottom line results. They tend to be more focused on numbers, where people that are high patient tend to be more focused on people. And again, you can see where if you are working with somebody in an opposite style from you in the patience factor, one would need to speed up a bit, one would need to slow down and consider people a little bit more. So again, this gives you an idea of what is that factor on the other side of where I am. When I'm doing coaching and working with people, I ask people to think about who are the people in your lives that you just know you're exhausted when you have an interaction with this person, or when you imagine having an interaction with this person, you just know that you're going to feel tired after that interaction. These are usually people that have some strong traits that are opposite our own strong traits. So someone high fast paced working with somebody high patient may be very frustrated at the pace that things go, at how relational and how relation oriented that more patient person is, and vice versa. So understanding that going into a communication can really help think about how you want to show up and think about what flex may need to happen there. On structure, people high planned tend to be very precise. They tend to be very detailed and accurate. They tend to like to have a plan or a schedule, where people that are high on spontaneous tend to be more generalists, tend to go with their instincts a little bit more, tend to maybe skip over details. And I have seen this in working with people. Myself being high spontaneous, I can see when I'm frustrating one of my high planned counterparts, because I will say things like, let's get that done by the end of the month. Now, to somebody like me, the end of the month is roughly a date. To somebody that's really high planned, that is not a date or a time, and it is not helpful. Does that mean, Friday at 5 o'clock? Does that mean the 30th? Does it mean the 31st? Does it mean noon? Does it mean end of working day, 11:59? And so for someone high planned, they will naturally go to that place. What is the date? What is the time? Where someone high spontaneous may be more general about how they set deadlines or how they speak about things. So what I've learned is to flex and make sure that when I'm working with someone high planned, the first thing I do is say, please don't write this down until I've thought it out, because I'm going to think out loud about this for a little bit. Don't start planning yet, because it's not really fully formed yet. And I also, at the end of those interactions, check for understanding. Here's what I think we decided on. Did you get the same thing? Or what do you think we just decided on? And what do you think the next steps should be for both of us? That's really saved me a lot of time and a lot of heartache and headache with my planned counterparts, because we understand each other and we leave with a shared understanding. The trust factor. So people high trusting tend to take things more at face value, tend to be pretty open, tend to have an easier time delegating to others, tend to just trust. And I say they kind of, you start with trust with these people. People high skeptical, you tend to start with no trust and have to build it over time, where people that are high trusting, you tend to get the benefit of the doubt and then you lose it over time. People high skeptical also just generally are more wary and skeptical about things. They have a harder time delegating. They ask really detailed and pointed questions. What I've found with leaders that share a high take charge, high fast paced, high skeptical pattern, people that work with them often feel like they are very rough, that they are maybe judgmental, that they are difficult to work with, that they don't care about their people. When I work with those leaders, they say, yes, I've heard all of that feedback. It's not really true that I don't care about anybody. I just get really focused on my agenda and what needs to get done. And if I'm asking questions and they're difficult questions, it's because I'm really interested in what you have to say about it. I want to learn what you're telling me. And I believe that you have that information. So while those questions may seem judgmental and skeptical, when I talk to those people, what they say is, I trust that you have the information. I would like to have it too. So that's why I'm talking to you. If I'm not asking you very many questions, it's because I'm not that interested in what you're working on right now. And I personally had this happen with my husband, who is high skeptical. And as we met later in life, reconnected later in life, and I can recall a couple of conversations where he was asking me really difficult questions that seemed very judgmental. And I thought, do you really think that I haven't, figured out how to live my life in all of these years? Like, have I just been, and when I saw his score, I realized, oh, this is how he gets information. This wasn't really a judgment about me not being able to or not having handled things in the right way. It was really, he wanted to understand how I was thinking about those things, because he was actually very interested in how I did accomplish some of the things that I had accomplished. And so while what I was hearing was a judgment of, did you think about these things? Did you think about these things? What he, in his mind, was thinking he was saying was, I'm curious, did you really think about this? Did you consider this? How did you come to this decision? You made this really great thing happen. How did that come about? So a lot of that can just depend on your mindset, but understanding that really did unblock some of those conversations for me and made me feel much more accepted and appreciated when I realized that that's how someone high skeptical tends to get information. And it's really not so much about what they're thinking about the quality of my judgment. It's really about the process of my judgment and how I came to judgment on something. So that's a lot of information. If you've got some questions about any of those things, I encourage you, drop them in the chat box. Leon and I will be happy to answer for you. Hopefully this is informative, and we've got a few more to go. So I'm going to keep going. But please drop your questions in the chat and we will get to them for sure. So our sixth trait is pioneering. People that are high pioneering tend to be very focused on getting something done. They tend to be enterprising. They tend to be very goal driven and focused on their goals. Where people that are high content tend to enjoy some balance in their life, tend to put time and effort into many things and maintain some stability and balance. So they will put time into family and into community and into their quality life and into themselves. People high pioneering like to initiate new things and then drive hard to get whatever that goal is. And they may compromise that balance with spending time in their community or spending time with their family because they're so driven to get whatever that new idea or whatever that goal is done. And so understanding, if you're very high pioneering, do you have a team full of people that are high content? And how can you help them see that this new idea is going to get them to stability and to a new place where what they're able to do and how they're able to spend their time is going to be even better than what they have now, to encourage them to change, because they will be somewhat resistant to change for the sake of change. but are happy to change for the sake of balance and stability and harmony and feeling good in their life situation. The next factor is risk. So people that are high risk takers tend to be very bold with their actions, tend to jump into new things, maybe not without a lot of research, without a lot of planning. And they also tend to be, people high on the risk-taking factor also tend to be fairly comfortable when things aren't yet decided. They're pretty tolerant of risk environments. Where people that are high cautious will have a contingency plan, will be slower to make decisions because they want to think things through and think through the implications of their choices. And they will tend to have, they will tend to feel more anxious before something is decided. So they'll be less tolerant of a risky environment and happier once decisions are made and they know what they're having to manage too. So even if the risk is realized, they'll recognize that now is the time to put their plans in place or move into contingency versus not knowing exactly what's going to happen. And then on that last factor, people high creative tend to be very original, do things a new way. They tend to like to start with a blank piece of paper and solve problems in a unique way, where people that are high anchored will tend to like to know that things are practical, will like to be experience-based and know that they can do something because they've seen it work before. They like to work with a template to start with. So if I asked somebody high creative and somebody high anchored to go solve a problem, that high anchored person would likely go look to see who else has solved the problem and is there a template for that and how can I learn from and build on something that somebody else has done. So not to say that they don't have creativity, but they're going to start with, how do we know that this already works? Who's already solved this problem? How do I leverage that information to help us do this? Where someone high creative might just start with a blank piece of paper and plan out a whole new way to do whatever it is, and miss out maybe on some of that prior knowledge that exists because they're just so excited about starting something new and doing it in a new way. So hopefully that explains those factors. And I think Leon probably ready for another poll question.
All right. Thank you, Nikki, for explaining the science and the factor relationships. So hopefully that gives everybody at least an understanding of how it works. And the next question we have is, can you see how using a behavioral science approach in your own team performance can make you a much more effective team? So if you just take a couple seconds and let's see, I've got to go to, not that one, this next one. Not sure why that one. Not sure why that's not coming up here, Nikki.
So if you want to just drop your answer in chat, you can see the question on the screen.
Yeah.
If you want to drop your answer in chat, that would be great.
Yeah, if you could just to go ahead and chat there, your answers. So the question is, can you see how a behavioral science approach can help you in your team performance? And just take a couple of seconds and answer that in chat, if you would. All right, we're getting some answers in here. All right, great, thank you. Yes, so far, yes, yes, yes.
Great.
Okay, great.
So keep dropping your answers in chat and I'm going to continue on. So knowing the science and knowing that using a validated tool can really give you a lot of insight into how to approach other team members, how to work well together. We're adding to that some of Gallup's research with Marcus Buckingham and Kurt Kaufman in their book, First Break All the Rules, really talks about how the greatest managers that they studied really look at people's talents and try to match talents to their role and try to match how they lead those individuals by how those individuals want to be led, by how they're wired. And so they define talents as a recurring pattern of behaviors that productively applied. And things that you can't teach. And so in our case at DNA, those talents are those natural hardwired behaviors. Talent of take charge, or the talent of cooperative, or the talent of fast paced, or the talent of patient. And can you put people into roles that allow them to use those talents that they are naturally wired to use? And as a manager, can you help put them in those positions where they are set up to succeed rather than set up to fail? And then can you treat them based on how they are wired, what their talents are? So recognizing that somebody that's high, fast paced is going to want to get to the point really quickly, is going to want to come to decision, is going to have an idea, is going to volunteer that idea very quickly. Where somebody that's higher patient or more careful may want to think things through a little bit more, may need to take more time in a meeting, may not speak up right away, would appreciate knowing that the decision was going to need to be made in that meeting so that they can think about that prior to having to show up at the meeting and speak up. And so as a manager, when you know these things about somebody, you can set your team up so that they can use the best of their talents, whether that is thinking things through and thinking of contingencies and thinking through the hard questions and giving some thought to how they want to respond, or whether that's being right in the moment and coming up with a creative idea right away, or launching into a different direction, or looking at things in a slightly different way, coming to decision quickly, or coming to decision together as a team, and collaborating and building on one another's ideas. So as a manager, when you know the DNA, how your team is wired, you can treat them each like individuals, and you can figure out systems and ways that you can include communications and include activities that pull from everybody's greatest strengths. And that's why we're so passionate about what we do here at DNA, is that we really feel like if as your manager, or if as a team member, you really understand the people that you're working with and can set them up to have tasks and roles that match their talents to the extent that that's possible, and to recognize them for those talents and to allow them to shine and use those talents, work just becomes a much better place when you've got people doing the right work in the right environment. So we're going to move into these what if scenarios that we've got. And Leon, I'm going to turn back over to you to set this up.
Great. Thank you, Nikki. And so one of the things that we've done, we typically present a case study or two on a webinar, and we sort of give you sort of the stages of that engagement that we worked in. So what we thought here, to really reinforce this whole notion of behavioral sciences and how it works, we wanted to present a so what if. So in this particular situation, I'll ask the question, and then Nikki will sort of give us ideas how to actually solve it, or sort of to work through the issue. So in this one, it's no time to slow down. And this happens quite often in the workplace. And we actually did get this question. Dear DNA, I work in an environment where we need to keep up the pace of delivery. I don't have time to slow down and flex to the needs of everyone on my team. I need them to speed up and flex to me and our team deliverables. What should I do? Okay, Nikki, this is a good one. I'm sure we have some firsthand experiences here in our own company. So I'll let you answer that.
Yeah, so clearly this person is a little bit frustrated. I mentioned that once you know behavior, you can flex to other styles. And it sounds like this person is working in an environment where they really feel like the pace of delivery needs to be coming quickly, where they need to deliver, and that maybe the rest of their team, saying that everyone on their team, right, needs to speed up and match them. So a couple of things that I would ask them to consider are, when you're asking your team to speed up, how good are the results that you get? When they tell you that they need more time, but you force them to speed up, are you getting the best results? I would also ask, is this speed a habit or a necessity? Often people that are wired to think and move quickly get into the habit that everything needs to happen that way. And when you really analyze it and think about, well, what might happen if I slow down? What am I afraid is going to happen if I slow down? It's really, I'm going to be bored, or I'm not going to be feeling productive enough. But actually our deliverables can still be met, and they can maybe be met with higher quality, and they can maybe be met in a way that matches the pace of my team a little bit better. And so I would encourage this person to think about, is this a habit that they're in? Is this because that's how they naturally are wired and they feel better to be moving at a faster pace? Or are they really in an environment that demands that pace of delivery? And I'd also say, does everything in your environment demand that pace of delivery? Are you prioritizing correctly? Are you understanding what really has to get done? And is everything an emergency in your environment? And if everything is an emergency in your environment, is that controllable? What could you be doing to reduce the number of emergencies that you have? And I think thinking about how much time do you spend reworking things or doing last minute heroic efforts versus if you had allowed enough time, if you had allowed your team to work at a more comfortable pace, would the work ultimately get done at the same time? Because deliverable 1 happened on Wednesday, but it had to be reworked on Thursday and didn't actually get to anybody until Friday, where if I had given my team until Friday in the first place, it would have been done perfectly. So I challenge people who really feel like everybody around them needs to flex to look at themselves and think about, is that really true? What might happen if you slowed down a little bit? And if the answer is, it really is true. We do work at a pace that, we work in an environment where the pace of delivery has to be fast. If we're not, it's like the chocolate factory with Lucille Ball, right? That factory needs to keep moving. And if we're not handling the chocolates, they're going to fall off the conveyor belt. And I can't eat enough to stop people from seeing them fall off the end of that line. Then maybe you need to think, is Lucy the right worker to have there? If she can't work at the pace that you really need, are you going to have some hard conversations and make some difficult decisions about getting people that are naturally wired to work at the pace that your environment needs? So those are the things that I would encourage this person to think about. I sense a lot of frustration in this question, and so that's what makes me really think that maybe some time reflecting what would happen if you did slow down a little bit, or if you prioritize things that needed to be done really quickly versus things that could be done at a slower pace. Can you find a balance where your team's not always flexing and you're not always flexing? Would be the direction that I would work with on this team leader or team member.
Excellent. Thank you, Nikki. And I encourage anyone to either put a question in the chat box or in the Q&A, and we can answer the questions real time. Thank you, Nikki. Great job. So here's our next scenario. So what if my boss is too slow? It's probably the opposite of what we just experienced before. So dear DNA, I seem to be focused on faster decisions and delivery than my leader does. My leader seems to want consensus on every decision, and he's hesitant to act. I'm so frustrated. What can I do? Well, this probably happens a lot, sort of in organizations. So we probably have some experience in this too. So I'll let you answer this one, Nikki.
Sure. So again, right? I would definitely empathize and validate this feeling of frustration, that it feels like your work is being held up because decisions aren't being made fast enough. Part of a leader's job is to make decisions and set direction, set some clarity. No wonder you're feeling frustrated in this environment. So it's natural to feel frustrated, but I do think that there are some things that you can do. And so some things that I would suggest to think about a decision tree discussion. And by that, I mean that I believe it was Susan Scott in her book, Fierce Conversations, described a decision tree model where there are root decisions, trunk decisions, branch decisions, leaf decisions. And this model of a tree is which decisions are leaf decisions? These are decisions, if you think about pulling a leaf off of a tree, it doesn't really impact the health of the tree that much. What are decisions that you can make and not have to tell anybody about? And then a branch decision are those decisions that you can make and take action on, and then just tell your supervisor about, hey, this happened and I did this. And then a trunk decision, because now we're getting to more of the health of the tree. A trunk decision would be those decisions that you come and make the decision together. with your boss, you can come up with some options, but you bring the scenario and your options to the boss and you make that decision together. Your boss needs to weigh in on that decision before the decision is made. And those root level decisions are really decisions that maybe you and your boss need to go to his boss for, or her boss for. They're more systemic and organizational type questions, so they really need the top leadership team to weigh in on before those decisions are made. So there's where you get a lot more collaboration. So I would encourage this person, have this discussion with your leader. What are decisions that I can make that I don't have to run by you? What are decisions that I can make and inform you about, but not discuss with you as far as should I or shouldn't I have made the decision, and just this is the decision that I made, you need to be informed of. And then where do I really need to collaborate with you? Where are those trunk and root decisions where I really do have to wait for your consensus and for you to weigh in on those? That can be a really helpful model so that you're not stuck on having to go to your boss and approve every decision that you make. Another thing that could be really helpful is setting clear expectations and deadlines together. You seem really frustrated that things aren't moving fast enough, your leader's not making decisions fast enough. Are you setting clear expectations and deadlines about when decisions need to be made, which decisions need to be made? Is your leader aware that you're waiting for them for a particular decision? A lot of times we get so focused on our own work that we just assume that people around us know that we're waiting for them on a decision. We may have even said we're waiting on them for a decision, but if the pace of work is quick in this organization, and if your boss really isn't wired for quick decision making, it could be that he or she has forgotten that they owe you a decision on something. Again, because it's not going to be natural for them to just snap their fingers and make the decision. They're going to want to take some time, it sounds like, to make the decision. If you haven't heard from them, remind them that you need that decision. Maybe ask them what information would be helpful for them to have to feel more comfortable making that decision. People that tend to be high on cooperative, which it sounds like this leader is, and maybe also high on patience and content, may be afraid to make a mistake in a decision. So ask your boss what information would be helpful for you to think about in making this decision. So that you can provide that. Maybe they're waiting for a piece of information, or they're trying to think something through and they don't feel like they have adequate information to make the decision, or the right people haven't weighed in. And if you can go coordinate some of that, that may help your boss come to a decision a little bit faster. The other things that I would say to consider, so those are things that you can bring to your boss and try to take direct action on. I'd also consider having you think about, when have you benefited from taking time to weigh options and get buy-in from others? When has this approach that comes natural to your boss really benefited you? And how can you appreciate that more as a skill that your leader has that maybe you don't have as much of? And think about, what can you learn from that? What can you learn from your boss's style? Sometimes you can learn positive things from a boss's style that you want to carry forward in your career. Sometimes you learn what you don't want to do from a boss. And again, figuring out, where is the lesson in this? What can I learn from this? Who really enjoys working with this leader? Is everybody as frustrated with this leader as I am? Or are some people really enjoying working with this leader? And how might I have to adjust my style if I suddenly were in the leadership position? Where, part of the team that's more like me would be happy with my decision making, but part of the team that really enjoys this current boss would really prefer that style. What would I have to do to flex my style? So I'm frustrated that my boss isn't flexing to meet my need for fast pace and decision making. But what might I have to do if I was the boss in this situation? How might I have to flex? And is there some room for me to do that in this current environment with this current boss? So those are some things that I would think about. Would love for you to drop into chat. What are some other things that you can think of that you might do or that you have seen done in situations either like this or like the one that we just discussed before? I'm sure that the rest of the group could learn from all of your thoughts too. So would love to have your thoughts in chat on how would you answer this question if it came to you.
Very
I
good.
think we've got time for one more.
Thank you, Nikki. Okay, so the third sort of what if scenario here My leader loves change, and we see that a lot in our work. So here is the question. Dear DNA, I work for a leader that loves to do things a different way almost every time we do something. Even if there is no need to be original, it seems like we are always changing something up. It completely stresses me out and I feel overwhelmed. Do I need to leave the team? I'll
Ugh.
turn that one over to you, Nikki, since you.
Yeah, like I feel the overwhelm here. So, um, here's some things that I would encourage you to think about. Um, and I don't know if you need to leave the team because I don't know if you can try some of these things and figure out. And it also kind of depends on what kind of relationship do you have with the leader and how much trust do you have. But what I would say is, can you think about using templates? Can you think about introducing templates to this leader and asking, does this really need to be different from the template? Can we use the template for this so that we can use your ideas and your creativity in a way that's more beneficial to the organization? Can you help them see where using templates gets more consistent delivery, gets faster delivery? If you're having to do something different every single time, you're not able to work to the best of your ability, and you're not able to deliver the kind of results and the amount of results that you would like to because you're always reinventing the wheel. If you can help your leader see that you'll be more productive and you'll be happier if you can limit some of the things that you do to templates, that will streamline things and will make things flow easier on the team. That can be a way to address this with your leader that loves change. Another technique that I really like, I read from Simon Sinek, and he says to do really effective feedback, if you do these three things, you have to do all three of them. But if you describe a behavior, when you change the way we run a meeting every week, it makes me feel completely overwhelmed. And I'm concerned that if this continues, I'm going to have to leave the team. So it's what is the behavior? How does the behavior make you feel? And it has to be a specific behavior, not you're always changing things, but when you changed the template for the meeting format again in our meeting on Thursday, it made me feel completely overwhelmed. And I'm concerned that if this continues, I'm going to leave the team. And then you just stop talking and you let that other person own that behavior and respond to it. It may be that your leader who loves change doesn't realize how overwhelming it is to someone who doesn't also feel that way, because we tend to be ingrained in how we're driven. And we forget sometimes that everybody doesn't see things the same way that we do. And that while it's natural for someone that's high creative and high spontaneous to change things up all of the time, and it feels good and it feels comfortable, that can be really overwhelming to other people. And so understanding that and bringing that to your leader's attention may be just the knock on the head that they need to say, oh, we certainly can't lose you from the team. I definitely didn't know that I was being this overwhelming. Yes, let's use some templates. Yes, let's make sure that we stay consistent on some things where we need to. And here are some areas where I think we need to push the box on creativity and do things in a different way. I think also thinking about, have you benefited from your leader's ability to adapt? Where has their ability to change things up and move things around helped you out? And is this change impacting the rest of the group and your ability to drive results? So like I mentioned with the templates, can you drive better results if you were using a template? Does the rest of the group feel this overwhelmed? I think that's part of, if you're working on a creative ad team and things are changing around all the time and you're doing different things with different clients all the time, and that feels really overwhelming because you don't have something that's consistent, maybe that kind of work isn't maybe that's not the right team for you. Not to say that you can't be on another team in the organization, not to say that you can't be on this team, but if no one else seems to be as overwhelmed as you with the amount of change or with the way things are being run, maybe that's just not a good fit for you. And that might be a place to look at, is this using the best of my talents and should I really be here? So a couple of things to think about in that scenario. So I apologize, I know we're close on time here, so I'm gonna just say, if you have other scenarios like this that you would like for us to tackle, you can email us at inquiries@DNA Behavior and we will feature a response. We can make it anonymous, we can take names out, or we can put names in, whichever you prefer. But we would love to hear from you. What are your what ifs? and how can we help answer some of those questions for you about how to work with people that are different than you are. So Leon, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Thank you very much, Nikki. So we really appreciate everybody's participation today. And so we are running this 8-week virtual team webinar. We started a few weeks back. All of them are on YouTube, sort of in a playlist, so you can listen to them if you missed one of them. Our next webinar will focus a little bit more on team performance. But when you understand sort of the behavioral science, which we spent time today, really understanding the communication and flexing with others, you can see how it can really gel a team or improve team relationships. And I think these what-if scenarios really help sort of bring it together. And Nikki, thank you very much for walking us through that. And I think we have one more poll question, and this was really related to the future content of the other 3. And I'm just going to put this up here, our third poll question here. To finish out the team series, which we have a couple more, we wanted to get suggestions from this group on our number 7 and 8 webinars. So would you like us to focus on the 10 unique the work styles? So the 10 that we've talked about in a couple of previous webinars. Share a case study on teams that's in trouble and moving them to a performing stage. Would you like to share via a chat on a topic? And you can do that now live. We'll grab that. Or we will send out a survey and you can send that in. That survey will be dispatched in about 30 minutes. You can put any suggestions there. If you would just go ahead kindly and answer one of those of what you would like to see. And that'll help us really understand for the next, we've got one next week, our number 6, but our 7 and 8, we really want to make it sort of custom to sort of what's important for you. So if you don't mind taking.
Leon, I'm not seeing the poll.
Oh, okay.
There it is.
Here we go. Great. Thanks. See some voting coming in. Very good. We've got about 60% in. If you want to just take a second, and if you don't want to submit one that's not is not mandatory, I think we're probably good. I'll give it 2 more seconds. All right, here we go. Here we go, Nikki. Okay, it looks like we share a case study on a team that's been troubled. We got 67% for that for option B. A is a little bit more on the unique styles. We can probably incorporate both of those. And if you do want to share any information with us, whether it's through chat today or the survey, please do. We really pay attention to that. Most of these what-if scenarios came from feedback. So thank you very much. And we do have always sort of in our webinars, we talk about our leadership behavior DNA book that was launched back in January. Hugh Massey and Lee Ellis wrote this book. They co-authored it. It really talks about all this concept that we've talked about, natural behavior, the behavioral science that Nikki reviewed with us today. It's available on Amazon, and it's a great read, pretty easy. It's not too heavy, but I think it's great. It really is the sort of the methodology of what we do here at DNA Behavior. And then finally, we have our next webinar, which is next Wednesday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time on the 29th. And that topic will be on the team performance that we've talked about. So with that, we do appreciate everybody's participation. You will get a copy of this recording along with the PDF. If you have questions, please direct those to inquiries@dnabehavior.com. You will also be hearing from Lisa Travis as well on our team. So if you have any questions about it, we're happy to provide those. And we thank you, and sorry that we went a few minutes over, but really worth sort of having your time today. Thank you so much. Thank you, Nikki.
Thanks.